Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen, an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos weekly for a couple of reasons. First off, it's just to help take my brain out of prep mode into writing mode as I'm getting ready to write the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. And the second reason is just to allow you, the viewer, who have come across this for whatever reason, whether you watch regularly or if you're finding this for the first time, to just gain some insight into one of the gospel lessons as outlined within our church year. This coming Sunday, which is November 22nd, 2015, Christ the King Sunday, our gospel comes out of John. But first, a word, Christ the King Sunday ends the church year. The church year begins with the season of Advent that actually will start next week, a week from now. Advent is the 4 Sundays directly prior to Christmas, and it begins the church year as we prepare for the coming Messiah. Our texts kind of look in that direction as the world is preparing for the Messiah to come into the world, which of course happens at Christmas. And then the church year kind of cycles through various aspects, culminating with the long season of Pentecost. It starts up 50 days after Easter, so we've been in it for quite a while now. And really chronicles the growth of the church from Jesus' day through to the end times. We kind of wrap up with some apocalyptic end times type texts. Actually, last week's video featured one of those. And then it ends with Christ the King Sunday, when we recognize that in the end, Jesus is the King of everything. Or at least that's the mentality that we take, that Jesus is Lord. And what does that mean? So Christ the King Sunday, also called Reign of Christ Sunday, is another kind of name for it, but it's the same thing. So that's what's going on this weekend. And our gospel text is John 18, verses 33 through 37. Fairly short little passage. Actually takes place within the trial of Jesus with Pontius Pilate, just before his crucifixion. That's where this is set. And this is just a small portion of it within John's gospel. The exchange back and forth between Jesus and Pilate is fairly extensive. It goes on for a while as compared to the other 3 gospels, where that portion with Pilate is fairly brief, just kind of a very short allusion, that's the wrong word, allusion, hint, as we within those Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus is, of course, brought before Pilate, and Pilate just kind of questions him a little bit, and then moves on. Now, here in John, there's more of an exchange as Jesus is really sort of facing off with one of the powers of the world, one of the political powers manifest within Pilate, who's the top-ranking Roman official in the area. Kind of secondary only to the emperor off in Rome somewhere. But so that's kind of what is going on and where this particular passage is found. And the reason that it's featured here for Christ the King Sunday is because it features the exchange as Pilate is trying to find out from Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Are you a king? So that's kind of what's happening as we come into this. So Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me? Pilate replied, I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Pilate asked him, so you are a king? Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Okay, so that's the passage. Again, very, very brief, not a real long one, but it's definitely this exchange as Pilate is trying to understand Jesus, who he is, what he represents, and what's going on. Now, Jesus has, of course, already been betrayed. He's been arrested. He's been tried in front of the religious council as much as they can with the high priest and some of the Pharisees, Sadducees, etc. They have found him guilty of blasphemy, claiming to be God, something that's very prominent here in John's Gospel, that Jesus oftentimes claims the title I am, the name that they know God as. And so that's their beef with him, and why they want him to be killed. Now, the whole political reasoning for Jesus' condemnation and Jesus' crucifixion is sedition. Essentially, crucifixion was it was common, but it was a cursed death for those who have risen up against the Roman Empire. That's why the Romans did it. And so the reason that Jesus is killed by crucifixion is because he claims to be a king that has no political authority. uh, and to kind of give a little context to this, there is a king of Israel, or a king of Judah at that time. It's Herod Antipas, one of the descendants of Herod the Great, who had been around at the time of Jesus, but Roman authorized king, essentially. Really kind of a figurehead as to someone who is loyal to Rome, who can give some direction and can give some stability within the region, but essentially has no real power, and that's the presence of the king. So for Jesus to be king of the Jews, that indicates some sort of an uprising against Rome, against the powers that be, and that's the charge that is brought against him. Even though Pilate eventually says, I find no charge against him, I find no case against him, I'm going to let him go. But because of the crowds that are in Jerusalem for the Passover festival, which is when this is all happening, Pilate needs to maintain order. If there's a mob, if there's a riot, whatever, that looks poorly upon him. So that, and he feels like the people are going to rise up against him because they're so passionate that Jesus be killed. So eventually that's what leads to Jesus being killed, but it's a trumped up charge that really has no basis, and Pilate kind of knows it, even though it's his decision. He tries to wash his hands of it, but it's ultimately his decision. So that's kind of what is going on around the periphery of this statement, or this passage. But really, in the end, Pilate is trying to figure out, who is this guy? Who is this common dude who's been brought before me, that everybody's so up in arms about? And so he asks the question, are you the king of the Jews? Do you claim to be a king? And the issue with this, Jesus never really says yes or no. He just kind of turns it back to Pilate. And that's something that I really like. And this is present in the other three Gospels as well, just this little tiny snippet of Pilate asks, are you a king? And Jesus, in the other three Gospels, Jesus said, you say so. Here in John's Gospel, it's the second time Pilate asks him, so you are a king? Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. And then he goes on, for this I was born to, and I came into the world to testify to the truth. Jesus is here to reveal the truth of God, that we have a God that loves us enough, that desires to be in relationship with us, and will do what it takes to overcome our sinfulness, because God will not tolerate being separated from us. That is the truth of the gospel. That is what Jesus came to do. We want to assign a label or a role or a title that we can wrap our heads around. And we can see for Pilate here, it's political. He understands king, he understands governor, he understands emperor, ruler, whatever. So he's trying to say, are you a king? Can I assign this label to you? Can I put you in this box? Because if I can put you in this box, I understand your role. I understand what you're trying to do. God will not be put in a box. Likewise, Jesus, who is God, is not going to be put into a box. And what we look towards here on Christ the King Sunday, as we're looking towards the now and not yet reality of Jesus sitting on the throne in the age to come, as well as Jesus' lordship now being fully God, and we try and understand, what does that mean? Well, newsflash, we can't. We cannot wrap our heads around it. We recognize that Jesus is top dog, that Jesus is worthy of praise, that Jesus is a leader, that Jesus is a ruler. He is all of these things, but he is so much more. Our labels are our attempts to limit or to identify or to label are not going to be sufficient. Our human understanding can't get there. It just can't. And that is why he continues to deny it. He says to Pilate, you say that I'm a king. This is how you understand things, but your understanding is limited. Now, it's interesting to hear Jesus start talking about a kingdom. There's only two places in John's gospel where it happens. It's here, and then it's way back in chapter 3 when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and he talks about the kingdom of heaven. No one can enter into the kingdom of heaven without being born from above or without being born again. And there's that whole exchange thing. Essentially, Jesus is saying there, you can't understand the kingdom, and therefore you can't understand my kingdom, and therefore you can't understand me on your own. Nothing within you can make you wrap your head around it. That's why we need to get to the Spirit. Martin Luther says, I believe that I cannot by my own strength or power understand that Jesus is Lord. We need the Spirit within us to help garner any sort of insight. But that's kind of what's going on here as Pilate tries to limit Jesus, and Jesus will not be limited by Pilate. One other point that is interesting to make that seems particularly fitting in light of recent events within the world, that Jesus says, my kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. I read a commentary yesterday that really kind of resonated with me, especially in light of a lot of violence and a lot of darkness that's going on in the world right now, that Jesus' kingdom is not one of this earth, because our kingdoms, our governments, whatever you want to say, tend to operate under power, displays of strength, fighting, battle, violence. A perfect example is, France was targeted by terrorists about a week ago, and shortly after that retaliated with bombings of the people that they thought were responsible. And so violence begets violence. Darkness grows. Darkness begets darkness. But the thing that Jesus is saying is, my kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom will not stand for this darkness. My kingdom will not respond with darkness or violence or battles or struggles or whatever. Darkness can't beat darkness. Only light can beat darkness, and only love can beat hate. Hate can't beat hate. And that seems particularly fitting right now. So those are kind of some of the things that are going on within the sermon. I'm not exactly sure which direction I'm going to go yet. Perhaps both, because both are important news, good news for us to hear. But if you have thoughts, questions, comments, by all means share those in the comment section down below. We'll continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, next week, no video. I will be off next week. So as we dive into Advent, sorry, you're going to have to do a week on your own, but I'll be back in a couple of weeks again. So have a great couple of weeks, and God bless.